The man poured an entire box of plastic explosive into a plastic container. Next, he picked up a paint roller, dipped it into the explosive, and began carefully coating the ceiling, forming a neat square. Directly above that square was a safe worth $35 million. After installing the detonator, the man decisively pressed the activation button. A low, muffled yet powerful explosion rang out, causing the entire building to tremble. In broad daylight, the safe vanished from the sight of the security forces in an almost unbelievable way. Below, his accomplices had been waiting for a long time. They rushed out like ghosts, hoisted the safe onto a small motorboat, and escaped. When the security forces realized what had happened, they immediately panicked and chased after them by boat. However, these foolish guards had no idea that they had fallen for the thieves' tactic of luring the tiger away from the mountain. The real safe was actually lying silently at the bottom of that seemingly calm river. John, the master lockpicker, was enduring enormous water pressure, yet he still remained highly focused on opening the safe. Meanwhile, on the shore, his accomplices discovered that the police had been mobilized. They had only 7 minutes left. This truly was a race against death. John clenched his teeth, using all of his superb skill and unyielding will.
7 minutes and counting. Let's go.
In an atmosphere so tense it was suffocating, he successfully opened the complex locking mechanism in just 3 minutes. A ton of glittering gold appeared before their eyes. The dazzling light almost blinded them. In the few precious minutes they had left, they seized every second to stuff the gold into the motorized bags until they were full. By the time the police stormed in aggressively, they had already fled with the gold right under the noses of the pursuing force. At this moment, Rob was skillfully luring the guards into running in circles through the winding canal system. He signaled to his accomplices who had already been lying in wait, and a cargo ship slowly moved across the river, blocking the waterway. Rob hit the gas and executed a spectacular turn. The unlucky guards behind him had no time to react, crashed straight into a sand barge, and got stuck. Rob easily escaped the pursuit. The whole group gathered on top of a snow-covered mountain. Although the wind was bitterly cold, the freezing weather could not extinguish the joy of victory burning inside them.
I want to propose a toast to us. And I want to propose a toast to Charlie, because we just stole $35 million worth of gold without even holding a gun, because he planned this down to a T. Nobody else could have done that. Nobody. Charlie!
Charlie!
Yeah.
Everyone was extremely excited, their eyes shining with hope for a bright future. However, in the middle of that festive atmosphere, only Steve seemed strangely calm. His expression was as still as the surface of an autumn lake, as if he were hiding a terrible secret. They drove down the mountain, eagerly preparing to divide the spoils. But unexpectedly, when they reached the magnificent dam, 2 other vehicles suddenly appeared, blocking the front and rear of their car like 2 ferocious beasts, trapping them in the middle with no path of escape.
Hey! Take your hands off the wheel. Steve!
No one could have imagined that Steve was the traitor. He revealed his true nature as a ruthless, cold-blooded man and stole the gold they had worked so hard to obtain. John was so furious that his eyes were blazing with rage.
There's nowhere you can go where we won't find you, Steve. You know that.
But Steve was merciless. Without the slightest hesitation, he pulled the trigger and shot John dead. Seeing this, Rob did not hesitate for even a second and immediately drove the car straight into the freezing lake. The car spun out of control like a shooting star, accompanied by desperate screams. Even after the car had sunk deep to the bottom of the lake, Steve still refused to stop. He crazily opened fire at them. The bullets fell like rain, creating frightening ripples across the surface of the water. Steve had no intention of stopping. He was determined to kill them all, right up until he saw John's body slowly rise to the surface. Only then, believing that all of them had drowned at the bottom of the lake, did Steve curl his lips into a smug smile and leave with his men. Fortunately, there were still backup oxygen tanks in the car. Thanks to that, the others barely managed to survive. Once they reached the shore, Charlie held John's body tightly, overwhelmed with grief. His eyes burned with the fire of hatred. A more brutal and more horrifying war of revenge was about to begin. After a year-long search, Charlie finally found the hiding place of the traitor Steve. However, Steve had hidden the gold in a more modern safe. Therefore, Charlie decided to invite Stella, John's daughter, to join the plan. Stella had perfectly inherited her father's lock-opening talent. She had now become a top expert in the field of safe technology.
You always work in the dark.
Makes me feel like I'm alone.
In order to take back the gold and avenge her father, Stella accepted without the slightest hesitation. The next day, Charlie brought Stella to meet the members of the group and solemnly introduced each one. First was Lyle.
He's my computer genius. You know, he's who really invented Napster? At least that's how Lyle tells it. He said Sean Fanning was his roommate in college and stole his idea. I think it's his first time riding that bike, though.
Hey.
You okay?
Yeah.
That's left ear. Demolition and explosives. When he was 10, he put one too many M80s in the toilet bowl.
Whoa!
Damn, that was cool. How'd you do that?
What? How did you do that? What? How did you What?
Lost a hearing in his right ear. He's been blowing stuff up ever since. Handsome Rob. Premier wheelman. Once drove all the way from Los Angeles just so he could set the record for longest freeway chase. You know, he got 110 love letters sent to his jail cell from women who saw him on the news.
And you? I never heard how you got your start.
Me? Well, I've been a thief since I had baby teeth.
Okay, you both know what to do.
Cough it up now. Whoa! Watch it, Spaz! Hey, what's your problem, man?
Hey, Charlie.
See you, man.
Good?
You alright?
Yeah?
After that, Charlie led the whole group to secretly lie in wait outside Steve's villa and observe carefully. However, they quickly became discouraged when they discovered that the villa was equipped with a terrifyingly advanced security system, with armed guards patrolling every corner. Worse still, there were also 2 fierce dogs in the yard. At that moment, a familiar figure suddenly appeared. It was Steve. He looked tense and secretly carried a heavy suitcase to his car. When Charlie saw his old enemy, his heart was filled with hatred. After Steve left the house, he secretly went to a jewelry store. It turned out that his purpose was to dispose of the gold. With such a large amount of gold, he did not dare sell it openly and had to carefully look for a black market where he could sell it off little by little. Charlie gathered the whole group to discuss the plan. The first step of the operation was to find a way to secretly break into Steve's house, take photos of the internal structure, and infiltrate his security camera system. This was clearly a highly challenging mission. However, Lyle, the computer genius, declared that it would be as easy as turning over one's hand. So the next day, Lyle and Rob lay in wait together in front of the telecommunications company, keeping an eye on a female technician named Patch. They needed to get a set of company uniform and a telecommunications repair truck. But this was no challenge at all for Rob. With just a few sweet words, Rob won Patch's heart and easily got the truck keys. After that, Stella put on the telecommunications company uniform, impersonated Patch, and used the key to drive the truck away. Next, Left Ear opened the equipment box and deliberately disconnected Steve's network cable. Steve discovered that the security cameras had lost connection and the television was full of static, so he hurriedly told the guard to contact the telecommunications company for repairs. Stella drove the truck near Steve's house to meet the others, and Lyle also eavesdropped on the conversation between the guard and the telecommunications company. Now the responsibility rested on Stella's shoulders. Rob gave her fake identification papers. Charlie attached a tiny camera to her body and told Stella that she had to find the location of the safe. Although she felt tremendous pressure, Stella still courageously set off. The guard carefully checked her papers, but Stella easily fooled him. Unexpectedly, just as Stella drove into the villa, two guard dogs suddenly rushed over and clawed at the car window, frightening her half to death. At that moment, Steve appeared in time and ordered the dogs to back off. When he saw the beautiful Stella, he immediately greeted her warmly. Once inside the villa, Steve talked endlessly, showing off his luxurious mansion. When Stella entered Steve's office, she followed Charlie's instructions and secretly opened the door to a small room next to it. Sure enough, the safe was sitting there in silence. However, the alert Steve quickly noticed it, hurried over to shut the door, and told Stella that there were no cables in there at all. Stella remained calm and pretended to inspect everywhere in the villa, but in fact she had secretly filmed everything in the room. Seeing that the mission had been completed, Stella said that she had finished the repair. After receiving the signal, Left quickly reconnected Steve's network cable. When Steve turned on the television, everything had returned to normal. Just as Stella was about to leave, Steve suddenly invited her to dinner. Looking at the enemy who had killed her father, Stella's heart surged with emotion. She did not refuse him outright, nor did she agree immediately, because she wanted to preserve this important opportunity for the next stage of the plan. Back at the base, Lyle used the video footage to draw a structural diagram of the villa. However, another difficult problem appeared. The main entrance and the safe were very far apart. Transporting the nearly 1-ton safe by hand out to the car was truly a difficult challenge. But then, after taking measurements, Lyle discovered that the hallway was 6 feet wide. Charlie suddenly had a brilliant idea. They could drive a Mini into the hallway. They immediately added weight to the Mini to simulate the weight of the gold, then had Stella test drive it inside a model built exactly like Steve's villa. The test results seemed perfect, but a fatal problem arose. The car's suspension system was too weak. Rob had to work very hard before finally finding a vehicle modification expert to specially reinforce the Mini's body.
Charlie, this is Wrench.
Hey, what's up, man?
Rob tells me you got real talent. We need some body work done. We need to pack up to 2,700 pounds of cargo in these minis, with enough suspension and horsepower to outrun anything chasing us.
2,700 pounds of what?
Of whatever.
So what do I get out of this mystery deal, man?
10,000.
As for Steve, in order to show his generosity during his date with Stella, he once again brought some of the gold to the jewelry shop to exchange it for cash. However, during the transaction, the jewelry shop owner accidentally mentioned Venice. That remark was like a spark igniting Steve's murderous intent, because the gold bars were engraved with the image of a Parisian dancer, a symbol connected to the Venice robbery that had shocked the entire country. Afraid that the jewelry shop owner might reveal his secret, Steve ruthlessly killed him. After that, he hurriedly packed up the gold and cash and prepared to flee. But at that very moment, a suspicious car appeared in front of the shop. Steve panicked, quickly wiped his fingerprints off the cash box, and escaped through the back door. The man who entered through the front door was the jewelry shop owner's cousin. No one could have imagined that this man was actually a notorious mob boss. When he saw that his cousin had been brutally murdered, he flew into a rage, quickly found the middleman involved in the black market gold deal.
Baby, go relax.
Do you know who I am?
Your mask off.
That's right. You were asking about gold bricks with the Balinese dance on them. Tell me why.
A terrible disaster was waiting for Steve. Meanwhile, Charlie's Mini had been fully modified. After the upgrade, the car had the power of a beast with extremely impressive off-road capability. Everything was ready, so they eagerly prepared to act.
The look on Steve's face.
The moment Steve drove his sports car away from the house, happily heading to his date with Stella, they sped toward his villa in 3 Mini Coopers. But fate played another cruel trick on them. On the way there, Charlie discovered that Steve's neighbors were having a party. If they blew up the villa gate, it would definitely attract far too much attention. Left with no choice, they had to cancel the plan. Stella had planned to stand Steve up, but now she was forced to go to the restaurant date in order to set up the next step of her plan. Stella had no choice but to go along with Steve. But during their conversation, one careless remark from Stella made Steve suspicious.
This lovely dinner, sparkling conversation, you still don't trust me?
Oh, no. I trust everyone. It's the devil inside them I don't trust.
It's an interesting saying. It's charming. Where'd you pick that up?
Can't remember.
Really? I knew a guy who said it exactly like that.
Really?
Yeah. He's the only person I've ever heard say that. He said it all the time. His name was John Bridger.
Stella reacted quickly and knocked over a bottle of wine. Right after that, the others who had been lying in wait inside the restaurant all appeared at once and surrounded Steve. Seeing them, Steve was utterly shocked. He had never imagined that not only had they not drowned, but they had actually survived and returned.
You know the only thing worse than a thief, Bendo? A coward.
And you should have seen the way your daddy begged for his life.
It's not worth it.
Put a leash on your cat.
Charlie bluntly declared right in front of Steve that he would take back the gold that belonged to them. However, Steve was not shaken in the slightest, because he was already very familiar with Charlie's way of operating. Charlie challenged Steve, "Just wait and see."
Okay, that gold is already gone.
It's bullshit, Steve.
No, really, it's over, Charlie. I'm trying to move the last 2 bricks. You want to come after me over a couple of lousy bricks? I mean, really, be my guest. Really, but you're off to a bad start, you know? Because you just blew the best thing you had going for you. You just blew the element of surprise.
Surprised? It's over when I say it's over.
But no one expected that while eavesdropping on Steve's conversation with the guards, Lyle would accidentally learn that Steve was preparing to move the safe to the airport and flee. Hearing this news, Charlie was not disappointed at all. On the contrary, he was delighted. He had been struggling to figure out how to break into the heavily guarded villa, and now the opportunity had come to him on its own. Charlie decided to strike during the transport. However, Rob looked worried and said that this would not be easy, because there were many routes to the airport, and there was no way to know which one Steve would choose. But Charlie remained confident, insisting that he had already arranged the route for Steve. As it turned out, Lyle had successfully hacked the Los Angeles traffic light control system. They could block the other routes and force the convoy carrying the gold to go along the road they had already chosen. Left quietly planted bombs in the tunnel beneath the only route that the convoy would have to pass through. Lyle went to the train station and used his specialized equipment to closely monitor footage from the surveillance cameras at the intersections, providing real-time information for the operation. A new member of the group, Ran, deliberately parked a truck by the roadside, ready to provide support at any time. The others sat in the car, patiently waiting for Steve's convoy to set off. But when the escort convoy came into view, everyone was stunned. Steve had deployed 3 armored vehicles using a visual deception tactic. He himself sat in a helicopter monitoring the entire process. However, none of this could trouble the intelligent Charlie. The 3 armored vehicles moved forward like giant steel monsters, but only one of them was carrying the $35 million worth of gold. How could they steal it in broad daylight, right before the owner's eyes? A major challenge was waiting for them. The first step was to determine which vehicle was carrying the gold. This difficult problem, however, was as easy as turning over one's hand for Charlie.
Napster, pull up the traffic cameras you're watching. Here's the first cam of the trucks go past.
Vine and Yucca, they're all gonna cross there.
See which one's riding low.
Personalized grid. Okay, first 2 are the same, so. Houston, we have our truck. It is number 128.
After receiving the information, the others immediately followed it and locked onto the target. Next, Lyle quickly entered commands into the computer and hacked the central traffic control system. After that, he turned all the traffic lights green. Immediately, a chaotic traffic accident broke out, and the entire street became completely jammed. Lyle deliberately turned the light green for the predetermined route. Sure enough, the armored convoy fell into the trap, moving exactly along the planned route and gradually entering their encirclement. At that moment, Lyle realized that the subway train had just left the station, and the next train would not arrive for another 90 seconds. Charlie decisively led the group in turning the cars around. Like a whirlwind, they sped through the crowd, throwing caution to the wind as they rushed into the subway station. They ran for their lives and arrived just in time to meet the next train. The whole group raced along the platform, joining in a suffocating race against death with the subway train. Right before the moment when the subway was about to stop, the minis shot recklessly past the front of the train like daring horses and finally made it safely into the tunnel. Lyle confidently pressed enter. As if by magic, the subway stopped precisely at the station and the power system was cut. The enormous train body blocked the entrance to the tunnel. The 3 Mini Coopers sped through the tunnel like swift little leopards. They quickly reached the designated position, ready to receive the safe. Steve sat in the helicopter, observing the entire scene. When he noticed that the traffic on the ground was strangely jammed, he immediately guessed that this was definitely Lyle's doing. Steve fixed his eyes on the armored convoy and did not dare relax for even a moment, afraid that the slightest carelessness would lead to a mistake. When the armored convoy slowly moved to the designated position, Lyle immediately switched the traffic light to red, forcing the convoy to stop. Right after that,
my truck. What the fuck happened to my truck?
in the blink of an eye, the armored vehicle seemed to vanish from Steve's sight. Steve panicked like ants on a hot pan and hurriedly sent people to search for it. However, when the bodyguards arrived at the subway station, they were horrified to discover that the tunnel entrance had already been completely blocked by the subway train. After receiving the report, Steve felt a surge of unease rising in his heart, as anxious as if he were burning with fire.
Where does the metro rail come above ground?
11th and Fig.
Position 2 and 3. Beat at 11th and Figaro and double back to Hollywood and Highland. Hurry up!
Rob decisively fired tear gas into the driver's cabin, rendering the driver unable to resist. Charlie used all his strength to pry open the vehicle door. When Stella saw the safe, she froze in shock. She had not expected Steve to have changed the safe. This one was completely different from the one she had seen before. Stella frowned. After a careful inspection, she discovered that this safe had a glass relocker system. Her heart tightened as she realized that drilling a hole would be extremely dangerous, because if the glass behind it shattered, the safe would lock down completely and could never be opened again. Left with no other choice, Stella had no option but to use her father's manual unlocking method. This traditional approach had now become especially difficult. Every movement seemed to stretch on forever. Stella's hands trembled. She focused with the utmost concentration on the unlocking process, not daring to lose focus for even a moment. But the tension in her heart still clung to her relentlessly. Time passed second by second, minute by minute. Everyone was as anxious as if sitting on a bed of fire. Worry filled the air. At this critical moment, Stella was so tense that she could not calm herself down.
I can't do this, Charlie.
Stella.
I can't do it. I need a drill, a borescope, something. I need
You
to
don't
get
need
in
any
there.
of that. Come on, Charlie. Hey, you can do this.
Under everyone's anxious ожидания, Stella slowly closed her eyes, trying to block out every distraction from the outside. She regulated her breathing and relied on her sense of touch to feel her way through each crucial step. Time seemed to stop. Only the sound of Stella's pounding heartbeat remained. At last, a soft click was heard. Stella had opened the safe.
Lie. Hey, don't you want to see what's inside?
Absolutely.
Although Steve had already spent part of it, the remaining gold was still worth $27 million. Their excitement came crashing over them like a tidal wave, sweeping everything away. They hurriedly loaded the gold into the car and rushed to escape. However, before they could celebrate, a roar suddenly rang out. Two bodyguards on motorcycles came chasing after them like shadows. They drove the Mini Cooper at top speed through the dark, damp underground tunnel, trying to escape the pursuit. But the bodyguards refused to give up, clinging close behind them like hungry wolves stalking prey, chasing them while also reporting the situation to Steve. The bodyguards immediately opened fire wildly at the car. The bullets screamed through the narrow space like the growl of death. Rob was no ordinary man. He decisively made an extremely hard turn of the wheel. Then came a terrifying crash as one of the motorcycles lost balance under the tremendous impact. But the other motorcycle still stayed close behind. Its rider continued recklessly firing at them. The three Mini Coopers burst out of the underground tunnel like wild horses, returning to the daylight. However, Rob did not hurry to flee. He made a spectacular turn, spinning the car 180 degrees.
Guys, we're moving.
But before they could breathe a sigh of relief, Steve appeared like a demon, aggressively flying in by helicopter. A suffocating chase began. Although Lyle did everything he could to turn the traffic lights green for them, they were still like trapped beasts, unable to escape the helicopter's pursuit. At this critical moment, Charlie made a bold decision. They would split up. He took the risk himself, like a brave warrior, drawing Steve's attention. Steve, the cunning old fox, understood the principle well. To capture the bandits, you must capture the leader first. Steve decided to chase Charlie's car like a bloodthirsty wolf. Because of that, Charlie bought precious time for his teammates to escape. But while frantically trying to find a way out, Charlie accidentally drove into a dead end. Just as he was about to turn the car around and flee, Steve's helicopter blocked the exit. At that moment, Charlie seemed to have been completely cornered. Just as Steve was gloating and believed he had victory in his grasp, Charlie showed astonishing courage. The damaged helicopter was forced to land on the ground. Charlie seized the opportunity to drive away. Steve was furious like a provoked lion. He crazily hijacked a pickup truck and continued chasing Charlie to the very end. The other two Mini Coopers had already arrived at the station meeting point and swiftly drove into the train car. Charlie also arrived just in time. At the very last moment, he jumped into the train car. At that moment, Steve had also caught up to the station entrance. The group was leaving calmly, but this scene was seen by Steve, who was hiding behind a wall. Seeing that the train doors were about to close and the train was about to depart, Steve frantically looked for the ticket inspector, intending to bribe him with money so he could get on the train. But what he did not know was that this ticket inspector was also a member of Charlie's group. When the train door slowly opened, Steve could not believe his eyes. Charlie stepped out from inside with a mocking expression, laughing at Steve for having calculated everything so carefully. Yet in the end, the gold had still fallen into his hands. Steve was so furious that he pulled out his gun and demanded through clenched teeth that Charlie return the gold. But Charlie was not afraid at all. Suddenly, two burly men appeared behind Steve and pointed guns at his neck. Steve could never have imagined that Charlie had gone so far as to cooperate with a mob boss. Even at this point, Steve showed no remorse and instead deliberately tried to drive a wedge between them. But he did not expect that Charlie had already prepared a share of the money for the mob boss. The mob boss did not want Steve to die so easily. He intended to take Steve back to his factory so that Steve would suffer every possible punishment and endure a fate worse than death. Charlie and his accomplices had successfully taken back the gold and punished the traitor. At the end of the film, the whole group raised their glasses together to celebrate their victory and look toward a brighter future. Today's story ends here. Thank you all for watching the film. What do you think about this movie? Please leave a comment below.